man-to-man, one-on-one coverage because the safety rolls to Jefferson's side.
This guy's like becoming like a circus act. Like he could do this.
Von Rock caught a ball with his thighs. We didn't even talk about that.
It was more of with his ass.
If he throws a good ball, this is a running, catching touchdown untouched.
To become who we want to be as individuals, and at the end of the day, that's going to help us be a successful offense.
Like, KP does like these flips after every win. Now I'm like just waiting for him to do his flips.
You can tune in anywhere that you guys follow us on social media.
Shout out to Jalen Ramsey. He sucks.
Welcome to the Practice Squad podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Mark. It is mid-June, and there is not a lot to talk about. I think the most heated debate we're going to get into today has to do with the Lions uniforms. So, a lot of good stuff.
That's when you know it's mid-June and the NFL's got a little bit of a slow. Because a lot of teams are just sitting on their ass, just waiting for like Saquon Barkley and like the Giants. They're just waiting for that July 17th. Like, okay, well,
there's not even anything going on camp wise because they're all in like their summer break or whatever before they get back at it. So there's not even anything to talk about there. Free agency market slow. Now, what you are saying though, like in 2 weeks we can start talking about fantasy football.
Pick up.
Free agency is gonna get moving again. But in the meantime, we have a very special guest. One of the hosts on the show literally calls him father, and the other
like a father to me.
He's like a father. We're gonna bring on Coach Tony Patritto, head coach of the Adams Highlanders, state championship winner, bunch of other accolades, coaching Hall of Fame. The list goes on and on. Not to inflate your ego, Coach, but how are you doing tonight?
Hey, by the way, I didn't know you could swear on a podcast, so I learned something today.
You can swear on the podcast.
There's been a lot worse said on this podcast.
A lot of bad things.
You should try watching an episode, Pops. You know what I mean?
I listen. I don't watch, so I'm good.
Well, you can hear the swear words too.
Yeah,
last time I checked.
So first things first, and this is kind of nice because I get to sort of ask Mark questions, along with you. How has having your son as a coach on the coaching staff gone the past couple of years? Has that been an adjustment, or with all the success you guys have seen, has that been kind of a nice way to get Mark integrated and he just gets in? You guys start rolling people.
That's a loaded question. To be perfectly honest, when you're a dad and you're coaching with your son, it's very much like being a dad, like you and TJ. There's great moments where it's smooth, everything's perfect, but there's not a consensus in terms of opinion. You may know that Mark's got some strong opinions sometimes, and we do clash occasionally on the sidelines. I think it's a good thing. It's healthy when it's controlled. Just like a father and son argue about all kinds of stuff relative to curfew or what we're going to eat for dinner. So for the most part, what I like the best about it is this quality time with him that most dads don't get to have. And more importantly, it's great for our kids. He makes our team better. He makes our players better. And that's what my job is about. So I can take a back burner in certain areas now because he does a better job in some areas than I do.
Do you have any things in specific that you feel like he's doing a great job at?
Yeah, I think getting the most out of every individual player, finite technique for receivers, most especially confidence for kids that haven't had confidence before is something Mark's really good at harvesting. That's what I see. The X and O stuff is the X and O stuff. I mean, football coaches are going to argue, and the last guy with the marker usually wins. But it's really the intangibles that Mark brings to all of our players and making them feel important and reaching their individual best. That's what we're all about.
That's awesome. Now, talking about the X's and O's, you've pretty much been a champion of the triple option basically your entire coaching career. Now, some coaches, I think, try to adapt their offense to the players that they get. And I would say that overall, you've ran a pretty stable ship about, nope, this is what we do. These are the plays that we run, and we're just going to kick ass with it. Yeah. As you've kind of gotten some pretty awesome talent over the years, guys come to mind like, Matt Sokol or Pretty Scored recently, or some of the other players that you've coached. Like, how do you maximize their talents within your offense without bending too much about what you're used to doing?
Well, I mean, it goes back for me 35 years. It's like you have to know what you know and coach what you know well, and you have something you need to execute at a high level. However, you definitely have to tweak based on the skill set of the players you have. But you have to have something to hang your hat on. You can't just pick and choose occasionally and kind of dabble in something. And there's a fine line there. So I think the art of coaching has to do with twisting and tweaking your philosophy to match the talent of your players. Parker Pico comes to mind. Very special young man. And he did some things that, really, to be honest with you, I've never really seen before on the football field relative to making plays as a runner at the quarterback position. And not since Tony Anizio had anything like that. So we have modified the offense a great deal. We tried to break some really strong tendencies we had a couple years ago. We were reflective after the 2020 season. And, our coaches looked at me and said, listen, when we're in shotgun, we're throwing it. When we're not in shotgun, we're running it. Like, that's not hard to figure out or defend. So I've been open-minded and listened, and we've done more to change some of those things. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but at the end of the day, if the second you stop learning, you become stupid. So it's my perspective. I'm still trying to learn, and we're trying to tweak the offense to give our kids the best chance at winning.
Yeah,
Adapt or die. Die.
It's a long podcast, so feel free to get as long-winded as you want in some of these answers.
It's not like there's a ton of NFL news we have to cover today.
Yeah, exactly. Slow NFL news week once again. Kind of a question that pops in my mind with that then is, you guys have seen a lot of success, and you've always been a winning organization, but the past 2 years do really stand out where it was new even to me watching you guys just roll some really, really good teams. Do you feel like that has come from adapting the offense? Do you feel like it's a change in the coaching staff? Do you feel like you just have more buy-in from the kids? Or is it a combination of all three? Like, is there any specific thing that you attribute to, Adams football really kicking ass and taking names the past couple of years?
Well, I think that at the end of the day in high school football, it comes down with chemistry and leadership from the kids. I think coaches get way too much credit and way too much blame. I've always said that. I'm going to give a lot of credit to your brother and the fall of 2021 football team in terms of they created a standard for themselves. They embraced our model of resilience, and they grinded from day one. And, anecdotally speaking, our first game was against the defending state champion, West Bloomfield. And there wasn't a guy on our bus driving over there that didn't think we were going to win that game. And by the way, no one else in the world, other than the kids on the bus, thought we were going to win that game. So I have to give credit where credit's due, and that's the players. And they created a work ethic and a standard of performance and a lack of intimidation that I truly respect. And that carried through. And I think last year, same deal. Like, okay, you lost this guy, you lost that guy. The Greek went to Harvard. Like, you're playing this crazy schedule. Like, what are the odds of you repeating? Well, we won the Red again, and we beat West Bloomfield again, and teams we weren't supposed to beat. Just because I think our kids have a standard that they want to play to. And that has very little to do with X's and O's. Clearly, we can do what we can as coaches to put them in a position to be successful. But I truly believe an inherent chemistry and belief system in each other is more important than any call I ever make. So, I'm going to credit the last two senior classes and what they brought to the table and the ability of the juniors in those 2 years to follow and be good teammates, even though maybe they weren't the stars at that time. When you have that kind of thing going on and you can still have fun at practice, then you got a chance.
One thing that's hilarious from my perspective is never in a million years would I have expected that level of buy-in from Josh and his class, because I, had them over for sleepovers, every week or whatever. Josh was bringing them around. And, when they're hanging out, it's an entirely different ball game. And then as soon as they step on the football field, 100% complete change in attitude. Incredibly serious about football. And I heard that confidence all the time when they were over at her house too, which I think is awesome.
They knew how to turn the switch. Like, they would mess around, pre-practice or, up in the locker room. They joke around. The second that they know they need to turn it on,
right,
they would.
Yeah.
I would say that's just as important. Coach McFarland, who I look up to a great deal, always talks about teams getting too high or too low, and it really can affect your play on the field. They had that confidence, but they also had that calm where they could call each other nicknames and rip each other worse than I ever could, where it kind of made everything okay. So when things were going south, we're down 14-0 in several games that year, those dudes didn't blink an eye because they loved each other. They could joke with each other, but when it was time to grind, they grinded. So Mark's exactly right.
That's a great segue too, because I did actually want to mention Coach McFarland. He's been by your side for close to 2 decades now coaching. What is that dynamic? Over 2 decades. What has that dynamic been like? And the relationship that you two have, and all the things that go with coaching for somebody that long.
Well, at the end of the day, it's like when you have a job and you're working with people that you truly love and respect, it sure makes your job easier. And for me, having Mark to lean on, I only asked for one thing. My only demand when I got hurt at Adams was that dude has to be on my staff and he has to be in the building, because I wasn't. And I knew that because of the man he was and what he brought to the table, both in terms of character and coaching, there was no exception to that. And they accepted those terms, and it worked out pretty well. And he's had complete autonomy over the defense since day one. Some head coaches, and I've heard anecdotally from some of my colleagues, who, when things aren't going good or there's a big play, walk down there and they try to veto their coordinator. Well, you've seen at the NFL level, fists have been thrown. I've seen coaches throw punches at each other in NFL games over those kinds of things. I have complete trust in him. I have blind faith in what he's doing for our defense and for our kids. And I can focus on what I'm supposed to focus on the defensive side of the ball. And because he truly believes in doing things the right way, we mesh. And some of the things I've been saying publicly about some of the negatives of high school football, I've gotten directly from him. And his attitude about it has really motivated me. For example, people want to talk about the differences between private schools or open enroll schools and what some schools are doing. And Max, since day one, has always been, listen, we can't do anything about that. They're going to cheat. They're going to cheat. But what's more gratifying than beating someone who's not following the rules like we are? That's the greatest thing ever. And of all the things I've learned from him, that's one of the biggest things. So I love the dude. I feel so fortunate to be coaching with him, and our kids are lucky to have him.
That's awesome.
Do you see this golden hour he's catching, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. With that.
Right.
You just purposely went outside knowing the sun would hit you at the right time.
There you go. See?
Yeah. Unreal. I got a question to ask him. And I mean, I've asked him before, but I'll ask him. You have done this for so long. You played, you've coached, you've watched your kids play as a parent. You're still doing it. What drives you from, I mean, obviously when you started, it was just like pure passion, young, hungry, you were done playing, you missed playing, but you're still doing it. What drives you to coach? Why do you love this game that so many people have questions about? And people have kind of stopped playing it. It's too violent. It's too dangerous. Soccer's the new thing. Lacrosse, but you have stuck so strong with football from day one since you were playing it back in the day all the way till now. What is like the driving force of that passion that you passed on to so many others like me?
Well, and what you answered the question. At the end of the day, the ultimate relationship business is football. There's a uniqueness to it. I'm not going to discredit other sports. That's just really naive of me because I don't know other sports. I don't know other locker rooms. But for me, it's the journey that I get to share with these kids and the coaches. Like, most grown men don't get to do that. Like, I'm a 58-year-old child. Like, I can be a kid. I can act like a goofball. And I don't mind when the kids call me on that. That's fine. John, your brother, was famous for it. But at the end of the day, it's the relationship I build. It's hard to walk away from. Like, it's so unique. And, when you hear senior speeches like we do at Adams, in December, that is those words that I hear from those kids, or a text message or an email, or the fact that John wants me to be on this podcast. I don't have any money, but I tell you what, the greatest wealth I have in my life is the relationship I've had with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of football players. And in many instances, their parents, who are so important to what we're trying to accomplish. So it's not always perfect, and not all the relationships are great. But I'll tell you that I feel really wealthy because I can run into someone that I haven't seen in 32 years that I coached, and there's a special connection. And most people don't have that in their careers and their jobs, and I'm lucky to have it.
I can personally attest to that as well, because before you were coaching me directly as an 8th grader or freshman, you were there building that relationship. And well after the fact, where I'm walking in the Kroger parking lot a year ago and I hear vocal, what the hell are you doing? And I turn around and see you in a crowd of people. And like, you have that infectious personality with.
When was the last time you went to Kroger, didn't see someone you knew?
Other than Mr. Patera, probably no. It's
this guy, every time he goes there, he knows somebody.
I saw Gettle there today. Listen, that's what it's all about. Like, that is truly, it's a special thing. It really, really is. Teaching isn't a conduit to that, but there's something special about the thousands of hours we spend together, whether it's Veer Camp, whether it's doubles, whether it's sitting around the locker room just talking, where you build those connections where, like, there's a couple kind of friendships. There's friendships where you're constantly in touch with somebody, and it's great. There's friendships where you just kind of drift apart. You never really talk to the person ever again. And then there's those special relationships where you see that person 20 years later, and it's like you never didn't see him. You see those people, and it's like, I can hug that guy. I love that guy. we don't have to be on Facebook and Insta, all that other stuff, communicating to know that we still love each other. That's what football brings us. That's the special kind of relationship.
To build off of that, there's different levels, like you said, to the relationships. One of them being the fact that it's high school ball that you're coaching. You've had opportunities to maybe climb up, coach college, or you've coached youth football, right, for a long time too, with me and Cole and Anthony and a lot of other younger guys. What is it about that high school and that youth age that makes you want? Is it still just the relationships, or has there ever been a thought of maybe leaving that to pursue something bigger for yourself, or is it just that high school levels? It's just like the purest form of football that there is, and you want to stay there?
Yeah, there's two answers to that question. First and foremost, I'm a husband and a dad first. Being a college or professional coach is not a great way to be a dad or a husband. When I visited New Orleans and the Saints, they had these little cubbies with mattresses in them, and that's where the coaches slept. They didn't get to go home. College coaches on the road recruiting, and for me, the opportunities to leave, that would mean leaving our house, not being able to tuck the kids in at night, not seeing mom every day. Like for me, that's a massive price to pay. And on top of that, the second part of that answer is there's an absolute altruism to high school athletes. They're playing for the love of the game. For some of them, just to belong to something bigger than themselves. For some of them, to get chicks. I don't know, but there's something really special about high school football that I am really attracted to. And that pure ability to have team first is, I can't sacrifice that. I was talking to some coaches who've come in to recruit recently, and they're telling me stories about NIL kids from Texas and California, where players are telling coaches, I'm not taking these reps because I'm not going to risk getting hurt. This isn't high school football. The kids are shaking off the coach saying, you know what, I'm not going to get hurt, so I'm just going to do a couple reps of 7v7, I'm out. I want no part of that. Being at a major university, coaching some of those players, having to recruit those kids, I don't think I could play that game where I could be something other than who I am and speaking the truth, where I would make them feel really great about coming to my university. I think I would be a horrifically poor recruiter. So those two things keep me where I'm at. How's that?
I disagree there, but yeah, I think you could recruit if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think you could as well, but I also completely understand the idea that there is a game that goes far beyond football and much more into the realm of politics when it comes to recruiting at a college level and all of that stuff. And how do you feel now that, that is becoming a conversation at an earlier and earlier age, right? Kids as early as their junior year now are being offered beyond scholarships sums of money to go and play football, right? And that's originally, if we want to call it the purity of the game or whatever, wasn't really affected until you graduated high school and were off to college. Now, early and earlier, that's becoming a thought in kids' heads where, I might be getting offered some sum of money from X college halfway through my senior year. Do I want to risk losing that or something like that? Has that become a conversation the past few years since NIL became a thing?
It's like, it's come so far. I have to be honest. When this fall started, when these guys were opting out of bowl games, which was the first window into this, I was like the old man, get off my lawn guy. Like, there's no way I would not play with my boys in the game. There's as a college player, unless there was no physical way for me to be on the field, I'm playing. I don't care if I'm Joey Bosa at Ohio State or I'm Joe Blow at Alma College. If I have a chance to play one more down with my guys, I'm playing that down. However, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars at stake here. There's families changed by these decisions with these young men. So I've come a little bit away from that, and I'm kind of understanding it more. But at the end of the day, some of these kids have been really abused by the college system before NIL. Some kids have really been, because the house has all the money and they have all the cards. And these players are totally vulnerable to adults making decisions for them. So in that aspect, NIL isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, I think it's polluting the nature of our sport. I've talked to NFL players and they tell me what separates a good team from a great team is chemistry. I think NIL is going to be the ultimate bugaboo to chemistry, because you have mercenaries coming in and they're playing for themselves, not their team. And I just don't think you can beat great teams that way. I think there's going to be a lot of really good teams, a lot of really good talent. The best teams are going to be the teams with coaches that can maintain some sense of togetherness, that special thing in football that we have, that's going to allow them to really win titles.
And I'd even argue all the way up to the NFL level chemistry. Obviously, these guys are millionaires, but I think the teams that do end up separating,
you see the
themselves,
teams like John. We talked about this a few episodes ago when the Jalen Hurts contract happened. He took a team-friendly way of getting himself rich. He deserved. Arguably, most people would say he deserved that kind of money. I thought maybe it was a little too much, but he did deserve a significant raise in his contract. But he took it in a way where, in terms of the cap, it allows the team to still build.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes did the same thing. Joe Burrow, I assume, is going to do the same thing. Tom Brady famously did it for. I mean, that's a big part of why the Patriots were able to continue that dynasty for so long, is because Tom Brady never became bigger than the team, no matter how big he got.
Aaron Rodgers is exceptionally good at keeping his friends employed as well. So,
well, he keeps them employed, but he sure as hell didn't take a pay cut.
Yeah, but John, what you say is important. Even in the late 90s, when I talked to NFL guys that I met, they said their greatest experience as a player is walking down that tunnel or out of that locker room with their boys in high school football. Nothing like it. It's a freaking unicorn in your life. Those same guys said they've been on NFL teams with great chemistry and NFL teams without great chemistry, and it matters in the win-loss column. I had a chance to visit the Saints, and I watched them practice in a spring OTA. And watching Drew Brees lead is like nothing I've ever seen on a football field in my whole life. Every pass he threw, first of all, was complete because he's ridiculously accurate. But he would run with the receiver into the end zone and run all the way back after every single rep. You don't think that gave him credibility in the locker room? Like, he changed the culture of a team that struggled for 50 years because of his leadership. So I don't think you can underplay leadership and chemistry in NFL either. I think you're 100% right, John.
When we had Coach Bonamigo on, he said he would leave. He'd think he'd be the last one in the building. Bono. He put in a long day's work, extra time. Coaches already went home to their families. Like you said, some of them sleep there. He's leaving. And of course, last car in the parking lot, Drew Brees. And then comes in the next morning, thinks he's getting there before everybody to get a head start. Drew Brees, car parked, workout already done, watching film. Who knows how long he'd already been there. And he said that was just every day.
Few relationships like
every day.
Brees and Peyton. I mean, truly, they ran such a stable ship from a chemistry perspective in New Orleans. So another question too, just on that note, right, is you've had the unique opportunity of coaching all three of your kids pretty much from the beginning of their athletic careers all the way through high school. What were kind of the lessons learned from that, and also kind of the unique rewards that come with being able to coach your own kids?
And that's a hard one, because I can remember when Mark finished his senior year at the banquet, I had to apologize to him because there's no blueprint for coaches when it comes to coaching your kids. The tendency for some is to do everything to elevate their kid and make it all about their kid and themselves. And that's a mistake. Another mistake coaches make, like I made, is you do everything you can to not have that appearance. So you just grind on your kid all the time, and you're constantly holding to a standard that's really not reasonable, because you don't want the other teammates to think that that player is getting special treatment. So that apology happened. As I coached Cole and as I coached Anthony, I think I got a little better with it. But you mentioned Mr. McFarland earlier. At the end of the day, our meetings were simple. You guys coach my kids. You make decisions about whether they're on varsity as a sophomore, or who we throw the ball to, or who we're playing where, because I can't be impartial. And if I'm going to be impartial, I'm actually going to be impartial in the wrong direction. So, and I learned through that dynamic. I was blessed to have three really talented kids. And it's really funny, John, in our community, and we have 99% of the fans are amazing. They're so supportive of Adams, but there are still people to this day that were my friends that are no longer my friends, that truly believe that Mark, Cole, and Anthony played only because they were my children. And I don't know whose eyes they're using to watch them play. Mark was really good. I don't mention All-State. The other two were All-State, not chosen by me. But that's just the reality of daddy ball and coaching football. And I've had tons of conversations with your dad and coaching. I coached youth football for 10 years, since Mark was 7 years old. And that was even harder, because the glasses are even thicker for those parents. And you can try to do everything right, and you can't. It's impossible.
Yeah, and I knew I was asking a question that could go a few different ways, right, with that, because, I know that that had to be really rewarding in a lot of ways. And I also saw firsthand the challenges that kind of came with that I think were really unfair to both of you. Because again, like, being a teammate with Mark, I mean, Mark was a quiet, confident leader for the rest of us to, rally around. And so the idea that, he would be in the successful positions that he was in just because of the fact that his dad was the head coach was a very silly notion. And it is unfortunate that those things happen.
But here's the reality. Here's the reality, though. In life, I don't care what business you're in, you have to make difficult choices sometimes. I would much rather have risked and dealt with those problems to have that time coaching my 3 boys than to take the easy route and send them to another school. I mean, Al Fracassa, one of my good friends, because he didn't want to deal with this. I mean, he's a legend. He's the winningest coach in the history of our state. Well, it was at one time until Harrington passed him. Sent his kids to a different school because he was not going to deal with that. And I talked to him about it many, many times. He goes, Tony, he goes, I had to do that. There's no way I could have brought my son to Brother Rice because it would have been a nightmare. So at the end of the day, I chose to make that risk, and I would never, ever second guess that choice. I think I made the right call.
In a weird way, too, John, it helped with, like, in hindsight, at the time it sucked, but there's that pressure, right? You're the head coach. He's got all this success. He, I mean, everybody knows who he is. Like I said, he goes to Kroger. Everyone knows who he is. And now it's like, okay, you got the same last name. You look like him. How are you going to play? Right. So I was the first one to do that. And a lot of people, thought that I didn't deserve to be, playing varsity as a sophomore or getting the ball thrown to me or anything like that. So I had to deal with that stuff, with that pressure. But I think what it forced me to do, and then Cole and Anthony following, is play to a standard that we probably never would have gotten to without that pressure. We sure as hell weren't going to make him look like a fool and put him in a hard spot and say, okay, well, you're still going to play us because we suck? Or are we going to go be great regardless and make it damn sure that no one in the crowd thinks that we shouldn't be on the field? That's what it came down to. It was like, okay, well, he's on the sidelines, and it's going to be kind of embarrassing if we're not good or not playing. And let's not make that decision hard for, hey, it's 3rd and 15. Are we throwing the ball to Mark, or are we going to go somewhere else? Like, let's not make that decision hard. Let's make sure every coach and staff agrees, everyone in the crowd knows where it's going, and that he's going to catch it every damn time. Like, that was what I kind of put on myself, and I think Cole and Anthony did the same thing.
And that's a brilliant point that I think, maybe even I didn't spend enough time considering is obviously, like, you want to prove those people wrong. And I think that's awesome. Also, I got like 2 or 3 questions left here because you guys keep opening up a lot of awesome segues. And obviously I know the history of Adams High School football pretty well, having played there. The Brother Rice rivalry, right? And I know that's a little bit more in the past now. But, during that time period, what was that like, between the relationships you had with the coaches and facing off against each other, as frequently as you guys did?
Yeah, that was, for our community, very special. Obviously, the first one was in the state final in 2003. And then there was the game in 2005, then 2007, then 2009. And the crowds were massive. Like the feel of the field, that's what high school football is supposed to be about. In many ways, I feel kind of guilty because I framed it good versus evil. It was kind of like, we're doing the right way. All of our kids are from an 8-mile radius, and they got all these deuce all over the place, and no one thinks we can win, and blah, blah, blah. And that's what coaches do. And in many ways, I kind of meant it. But I love those games. I had mad respect for Coach Fracassa. We have been friends for over 35 years. He's one of the guys that called me when I had COVID. Like, he's a very special person in terms of maintaining lifelong relationships. We talked about that earlier. But those games for our community and for our players were special. When we won the game in 2007, Josh Rennell scored on 29 jet at the end of the game to win it. Man, the crowd rushed the field. It's the first time that happened in my career at Adams. There had to be 5,000 people on the field. That was, for our kids, I could not have been more happy.
That's awesome. And then, on the note of having kids within an 8-mile radius, right? Yeah. You've had, not the largest rosters by any stretch of the imagination. You've had to work with who you have. How has kind of overcoming those challenges, and maybe you can turn this into kind of an X and O's questions, right? Why is the triple option a good offense to run when you don't know who you're going to get any given year? And there might be some gaps you got to fill talent wise, right?
I will tell you, that's a wonderful question. The reason why I run triple is my first head coaching job at Bishop Foley. I had 21 guys on my varsity. We were in the Central Division of the Catholic League. So we're going to play De La Salle. We're going to play Brother Rice. We're going to play DePores. We're going to play all these schools. And we had 160-pound linemen. Like, if we line up and try to run inside zone or counter tray or any of that stuff, we're not getting anywhere. So we made a decision as a staff, and consciously I'm the one that kind of brought that home, is we're going to double at the point of attack, make people play disciplined football on defense and keep possession, because we can only line up for so many downs and stop these guys. And that was the birth of the triple for me philosophically. I mean, back then it was split back, double tight, like Southwest Conference, like old Texas, I am hip stuff from the 60s and 70s that we were doing. And, I give a lot of credit to Tony. He's kind of my football mentor. And over time, it has morphed into flex bone and bird and pistol or shotgun, and we're still running philosophically the same stuff. But that hasn't changed. West Bloomfield has 7 Division I players in their defense. From my perspective, they should never stop us. Not one possession. Punt is failure. Field goal is failure. And that's my approach. Whether we're running triple or we're doing some of the newer stuff, if we execute at a high level, they ain't going to stop us. So that was the birth of the triple, and that's why we've always done it. That's why I'm never going to completely leave it.
I totally get that. And then, just one question, kind of departing from high school football a little bit. The Detroit Lions have the most hype behind them that they have had in Mark and I's lifetime for sure. And it's probably rivals any, Barry Sanders era or whatever that you've lived through. What do you think is making that team, finally, maybe kind of overnight, if you actually look at the grand scheme of things, a much better ran team with a lot more chemistry than they were in years prior? Like, what do you attribute that to when you're dealing with, multimillionaire athletes?
Yeah.
And
I'm going to give a lot of credit to Dan. What your shirt says has a lot to do with it. People make fun of mottos like resilience or one more, or whatever we've chosen in any of our years. But it has to have meaning. I honestly believe there's been a change in the chemistry and the feel of their locker room that translates to how they play in games. Talent's talent in the NFL. At the end of the day, you got to have talent. The play of Jared Goff, no one saw coming, those kinds of things. And they brought in some seasoned veterans to lead. But at the end of the day, they have a different perspective on how they play. I'm going to be honest for a minute. My greatest fear is all this love they're getting. I think I would much rather the media, if I'm Dan Campbell, saying, well, they got grit, but they ain't as good as this team or they ain't good as that team. Because that puts you in a position where the chip on the shoulder cliche kind of bugs me a little bit. But I love being an underdog. Like, that is the greatest feeling in the world, because you have this motivation to prove people wrong. I think in many ways, everyone wrote them off last year. And the last 8 or 9 games, we were happened to be in exactly right. Yeah, Mr. ACT or SAT. The Green Bay game, there was no motivation at all for that team to win that game. Zero. They knew they were out of the playoffs. The game meant nothing. And those dudes went out there and balled. Like, for me, that signalment means Dan Campbell has that team with a common goal. Now, can he maintain that? That's the question. Like, you can talk roster moves all you want. That's, for me, what's going to dictate whether or not they win the division or not.
You could feel that shift that he's talking about. I went to, if you've been following the podcast for a while, we went to with my dad here, my brother, and a lot of and he talks about relationships to come full circle. A lot of his former players that he had from Foley hooked us up with an awesome weekend in Green Bay for that Sunday night game. And we were on the field. We had great seats. We witnessed kind of that culture that he just mentioned, and the shift of basically killing Aaron Rodgers and what was Rodgers, Packers, playoffs hopes. Basically, any hopes of him ever being a Green Bay Packer again were killed that day by just an energy and a will, even though the Lions knew their playoff odds were destroyed when Seattle won earlier in the day. So it was incredible to watch and see that, but you could feel that shift, and like they just did not care, right? They were going in there and they were just gravediggers. They were going in there to destroy and end something. A team that was still playing for very much at the time were beat by a team that had nothing left. I mean, their season was over whether they won or lost.
I never understand the power of passion in football. You just cannot, because there's just so many moving parts, and the strength has to come with one loud voice. So when you have passion on your sideline, and I could feel it too. When you see Dan Campbell talk, people think it's a shtick. Like, first of all, he's physically terrifying to meet. Like I met him in New Orleans. He is a massive dude. His shoulders are about this wide. Like
his trap muscles are like mountains that go up to his
crazy.
neck.
Like,
it's
oh my gosh,
ridiculous.
he's Ben Piersmark if you tape me to him. Like he's just this huge dude. But he's got this aura, this thing about him that's so incredibly sincere. People that don't know him, that watch him on TV, they think this is this shtick he's putting on. That's who he is. And players see through shtick. They see through stuff that's not real at all levels of football, by the way. And I think he's a for real dude. I don't want to give him too much credit yet until they do something more. He's going to prove who he is if they can show up, go to Kansas City and steal that first game, and then have momentum. That's what's going to define him, not the fact that they came back last year. Can you be perpetual in your passion with your locker room?
Now, what were your thoughts, though, on his game management, especially early last season, which pretty much cost us the playoffs?
Okay.
If we really
You put me in that situation because as a head coach, I don't like criticizing publicly other coaches because I've made so many mistakes in my career. Like,
yeah, but you're not paid a bajillion dollars to.
It's not the point. It doesn't matter.
One sole thing.
Listen, to the players on our sideline, a loss to a team like Clarkson, that was my fault, is just as important as the Lions not making the playoffs. There's, from my perspective, I treat it with equal pressure. It's the same thing. So what I love about him is I think he actually took a step back, heard some of the noise about the mistakes he made, and worked to get better. No coach is infallible. No coach isn't going to not make mistakes. We're going to do things that sometimes are guttural. I think that's the nature of our sport. And when you stop doing that, and if you don't have the confidence to do it, get out. You have to believe in what you're doing. But I think he's going to improve in that, and he needs to listen to people about end of game management, timeouts, that kind of stuff. He needs to listen to people with more experience than him as opposed to making those calls himself, because that's what I've learned to do.
I mean, some of them are nuts. Like some of them are just insane.
But again, it's a process. So that's over. Let's talk about 2023 for the Lions and whatever.
And I just quickly want to jump in and say it is hilarious because his personality is so many cliches that you almost don't think it's real.
No,
and you realize he is 100% legit. He is like listens to Metallica, drinks a pot of coffee, wants to run through a wall. Football is everything every single day kind of guy. And it is awesome because I do think it's infectious.
100%. Like, coaches have to be who they are. I mean, you, John, you have an inside window to all of this, right? Like some coaches, they sit in their office, the doors closed. You don't see them until practice starts. When practice ends, they're gone, or they're in their office and their assistants handle all this stuff. Some coaches are more open to suggestion from players and other coaches. I mean, everybody, but you got to be true to yourself. I've seen coaches try to be like someone else they want to emulate. It doesn't work. I've actually done experience with coaches at camps where I'll say something that's totally doesn't make any sense to see if someone will repeat it, just to see if they're just trying to and I've done it as like a psychology experiment. I'm not proud of it, but Veer Camp after a while is like, okay, we got to do something. I'm getting bored. So I've actually done that several times and it's worked. It's like, that guy's a faker because he's just repeating what I said, not having any idea what it means. It doesn't even apply to the drill. So yeah, it's all about sincerity, even for NFL athletes. And I think Dan Campbell's sincere.
Absolutely. Mark, I do want to give you an opportunity if you have any other questions before we wrap up here. I know I've kind of steered this interview. Hopefully I've done a decent job in both of your eyes. So
no, you're natural. You're natural at it, John. I just want to have a couple fun questions with the big guy. Not even just fun, but do you have any negative and positive bold predictions going into college football or NFL?
Okay.
Any team that you think is getting way too much love that's going to be shitty? Any team you think that's getting no love that's going to be great? Any players that maybe that are getting slept on or are getting overhyped? I know you have opinions. So.
I do have opinions. I think the Cowboys are the most overrated team in football always.
There we go.
Drives me nuts. And I just don't understand they're not America's team, and they have not been since Roger Staubach left. So I don't understand that at all. I kind of like the Jacksonville Jaguars coming out of nowhere. I know it's not an edge pick, but I think between quarterback play and some of the acquisitions they've made and their passion to play through the end of the season, I think they're going to be kind of terrifying to play. It's like I don't necessarily know it's going to work for sure in Buffalo. I think Buffalo has probably one of the best rosters and one of the toughest quarterbacks I've ever seen. But there's something about them that Not sure it's going to happen.
Madden curse, maybe, perhaps.
I'm not sure, but I think at the end of the day, until someone beats Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey, they got to be the favorite. Like what those guys do in key moments in games is kind of indescribable. I know that's not cutting edge either. Let's talk about college for a minute. So if you look at Georgia and Alabama, what they've done is special. I will say this: what they're doing in Ann Arbor is unprecedented in terms of how they're recruiting against those schools right now. Defies logic. And I remember when Coach Harbaugh came to Vincent's house for his visit, he told me in that moment he had just sat at his desk and wrote down 10 things he had to fix that he was not doing right. And since that moment, Michigan has gotten a lot better. If these guys all stay 3 years from now, 4 years from now, Michigan's going to win a national championship. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but what they're doing, continue this.
If there was ever a time, it might be this year. Yeah. When you look at Georgia lost a lot.
Yeah. Quarterback play is huge, right?
Running backs, two of them, two of the top 3 in the country. You could argue. I worry about them maybe the best two.
I worry about them at the receiver position right now. I don't think they're as strong as they might need to be. If people load the box, they're going to have guys that can separate. But that's kind of finite football talk. You're the expert on that. But listen, I don't. I would also say, and you guys, Mark, you know this more than anything. I think Michigan State might win 4 games. I think what they're doing in East Lansing is a travesty to college football, and how they recruit and how they run their business since Coach Tucker's been there. I'll say, because listen, I don't care if he sees it or not. It ain't right. And they're going to pay a massive price with karma and a massive price with recruiting because of how he does business.
We've said in recent episodes, there's never been a worse time or a worse situation for Michigan State right now than the fact that they are. I mean, it used to be every year was, okay, Michigan State and Michigan is a rivalry, and then there's still Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. Right now, it's like Michigan beating Ohio State makes Michigan State so damn irrelevant, it's not even funny because the game is actually the game. And Michigan State is an afterthought for people in Ann Arbor. I mean, and that's how it should be if you're a Michigan fan. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how they think it should be. Little brother, right? And they should never, ever beat us. We're more worried about the team in Ohio, right, than we are about this team in East Lansing.
But here's what's different.
It's never felt more like that.
Yeah, but here's what's different. In the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, and even to the mid to Coach D'Antonio left, even when Michigan State wasn't good, they rose up for that game and gave Michigan hell. I mean, Michigan fans have to respect that. Like, I just think that's a fact. Yeah. I don't know necessarily that Coach Tucker has the chemistry in his locker room to do that anymore.
He did beat them in his first 2 appearances.
No question. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's like, but I think in many ways he's traded that blue collar grind, we're going to come up mentality for the flashy toy, and the flashy toy ain't going to get it done when you're not as talented.
It went downhill big time, I would say, after Kenneth Walker leaves, right? And then the fight in the tunnel.
That fight was something, man.
Not only did they get their ass beat on the field, right? They had that happen after the game. Terrible look. How he handled it was not great. Mel Tucker himself. How it was just not a good situation. And then it's leaked all the way into Michigan continuing to be better, beating Ohio again, going to the college football playoff, and having the number 1 recruiting class in the country now. It's like everything is pointing towards Michigan runs the state and might run the country here pretty soon, like you hinted at. And Michigan State is just left behind. It's hard for them to, without absolutely great coaching and stealing some underrated guys in recruiting and molding them into great players, to even come close to beating Michigan. And it's like they're the afterthought. It's never been worse right now for Michigan State, I think. And seeing Michigan get as good as they have and the consistency with Harbaugh, it's got to be tough to be a Sparty fan right now because there's no light right now. You can't see a light.
Honestly, though, Michigan fans our age, Mark, haven't really gotten that privilege, right?
No,
I grew up Exactly. I grew up listening to my dad being like, oh, Michigan was so good and unbeatable and whatever in the late 90s. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I would like to personally experience that sometime soon,
I don't think they lose a game this year.
I mean, they look really good.
Ohio comes to the big house to cap everything off. Their regular season games are usually pretty just like, I mean, they should win most of those games by 50 plus. And then, I mean, the Big Ten, aside from Penn State, who I think is coming to Michigan this year again, I believe.
No, I think it's
Right.
a whiteout game in
Yeah,
Cal
I
State.
think it's
it
a,
might
it's a
be.
way. Yeah, but I mean,
That's a
awesome
tough
game.
game.
That I'm
But
looking
besides
forward
that
to it.
game, yeah, I mean, besides that game, I don't know. I mean, I think they beat Ohio at home.
Listen,
think-
Mark, if you saw Ohio State play against Georgia last year in the semifinal, I would be careful before you make that an easy win. Like,
Did you watch them play Michigan
it's
a
not
few
the
weeks
point.
prior?
The point is they had Georgia beat, man. Like,
Yeah,
listen,
no more Stroud, no more, Jackson
but
Smith's
that's
gone. I
the
know he didn't
nature
play.
of college football. You're never gonna hear me say that. First of all, and I'll say this too: like Michigan could lose to Michigan State next year as well. Like, that's what's
I would
special
be
about college
shocked.
football. Not saying it's gonna happen, but it could. Like,
Right.
it's you got to earn your stripes, man. No one's gonna hand you anything.
Yeah, I mean, there were bad Michigan teams that really gave it to Ohio State for a few games too. So you're completely right about
Appalachian State.
that. Right. Exactly. Thanks for bringing that up, Mark. Coach, this has been an honor. Honestly, it's been really awesome. I haven't even heard you speak really since you got inducted to the Hall of Fame, and I do always miss just some Tony P speeches as well. They're always good and easy to grab people's attention with. So we really appreciate you coming on. Any last things that you want to mention before you sign off here?
No, listen, you guys are doing an amazing job. I'm so proud of what the synergy that the two of you have. It's pretty cool. Your message is cool. Your guest list, I'm probably the worst guest you've ever had. So that's, I'm not Khalil. I'm not playing in the league. But I'm an honor. It's an honor for me to be here. And TJ and I couldn't be more proud of our sons than we are of you two. And I'm glad to call him a good friend as well. So thank you and congratulations on all you've accomplished.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thanks,
Appreciate
Coach.
having me on. We'll see if you need any help turning off your laptop.
Leave him alone, Mark.
I had to get him all set up for those before we went on air. He's out there. He's out there. I mean, he is kind of like to technology as like Aaron Rodgers is with like the Chicago Bears. Like technology just kind of owns him. You know what I mean? It's not a good thing for him.
All right, we had a good thing going this 45 minutes, Mark, but I'm getting petty now. I got it.
I had to throw something in there.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, thank you. All right, see you guys.
What I am honestly impressed about is the fact that the Wi-Fi held up with two of you streaming at once.
Oh, it's amazing. With him sitting out on the deck too, I wasn't sure of what was going to happen there.
I don't want to jinx it. That was maybe one of the best Wi-Fi situations we had for an interview in like recent memory. So
maybe it works better when there's two guests in the same house using the same internet in one episode.
Okay, so look, we'll keep things kind of short and sweet here because again, it's a slow news week, and frankly, I think like 3 out of the 4 things that we're going to talk about relate to the Lions. So if you're not a Lions fan, get over it.
But we will go over some of our favorite teams in each division too.
Yes, yeah, so that is a topic that I want to talk about.
There will be a lot of other stuff covered, but yeah, Lions
So we'll hit the not Lions stuff first. So your dad mentioned before we started rolling that there's been some whisperings that DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook might try to package deal wherever they go. Do you think that increases the chances that they both sign with the Bills? Do you think money becomes less or more of a factor there? Is that just smoke, right? Like,
I think it's just smoke, John. I think it's just smoke. And why I think that is, if we're being honest, there's been 2 teams that DeAndre Hopkins has visited and spent any real amount of time negotiating and talking to. The Titans, who are not in any position to make a run or win, and the Patriots, who, let's be honest, might finish last in their division this year. So he's about the money in this situation. I think it's pretty obvious. He wants to go to the team that's going to pay him the most, similar to what OBJ did. Now, OBJ lucked out and was able to go to the Ravens, who are a team that could win with a young quarterback that a lot of receivers seem to want to play for. But DeAndre Hopkins is, I think, chasing the money, and I think that he might just be, blowing smoke, saying that he wants to team up with Dalvin Cook. And, at the end of the day, this isn't the NBA. You can't package 2 players together in free agency and think it's going to completely transform. If you swing and miss on that, you're setting your team back. I mean, that's a win now move, right? If you go try to, because you're going to have to pay them both a very large sum of money. There's not many teams there's not many teams that can afford to do that. 2, again, it's risky. Dalvin Cook misses a lot of games. DeAndre Hopkins misses a lot of games in recent years. Like, you're going to go spend all that money on 2 guys that are injury prone. and towards the end of their career, probably past their prime, both guys. That doesn't make sense to me. I feel like it's kind of a reach. And maybe he's just trying to see what other teams throw their. Maybe he thinks he'll get more money out of it if he does that. Maybe, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to happen.
No, it's definitely an interesting situation. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, just to get your take on, right? So it's kind of turns out that this entire Diggs situation, with him missing camp for the first day of camp for the Bills, we do have an answer as to what apparently happened, right? And this is alleged, but there's been a few different sources that have kind of confirmed this is what went down. Diggs restructures his contract this past year. Okay, so not a money issue. Diggs also was the second most targeted receiver in all of the NFL last year. Not a playtime targeting issue. So what was it? Apparently, Diggs restructured his contract under the impression that they were going to get another star wide receiver on the opposite side of him, like Hopkins or whoever else, so that it would be impossible to, double team both guys, right? That's essentially how Diggs framed it. Bills didn't end up signing anybody. Diggs walks in and gets into it with McDermott in the front office, basically. And McDermott is actually the one who excused him from minicamp that day, not Diggs. That is a very interesting story. And people, I think, and Mark, I think your kind of first impression of that were like, oh, like they're done with Diggs, like BS, like, he's causing drama. And I can see that side of it. The other side of it is that he made a pretty selfless restructuring deal on his contract under the impression that his team was going to get better so that they could win more games. And the front office didn't do anything about that. I understand why he's upset, frankly. And so it is interesting, obviously all rumors, all hearsay, but you could see how McDermott talked about it. Like it sounded like some, they were fresh off of getting into an argument with one another. And that seems like the most likely candidate. So
it makes sense. It all makes sense. You explained that very, very well. And at the end of the day, I like you said, I think it's over with that drama, right? I think they've moved past it. I think at the end of the day, they have a common goal in Buffalo, and they know that with Josh Allen at QB, there's a window to win, right? To finally win a Super Bowl. With that dude at quarterback, you're gonna have a chance, right? And I think Diggs just needs to realize let the front office do what they do. Okay, there's only a few players in the NFL that have any sort of say in what they should do with free agency, and it ain't receivers. I'm sorry.
No, it's almost always quarterbacks. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're not a top 3 quarterback in the league, you probably shouldn't be saying anything. That's how I view it. That's what I think. Diggs is a great player. Probably a top, 6 or 7 receiver in the league. Doesn't mean he has say in who else they should go get.
Now, in Diggs' defense,
he can say something.
In Diggs' defense, what if you get approached as a receiver and you say, hey, we want to mess around with your money, your contract money a little bit so that we could go sign a superstar on the other side of you. And then they don't do that.
Yeah, but again, at the end of the day, he restructures his contract. It could be because they want to give, a defensive player more money, which they did. They Ed Oliver signed. So it's like, I wouldn't say they haven't done anything offensively besides drafting like Dalton Kincaid. They really haven't added to their offense whatsoever. And,
and their defense, offense wasn't the issue, and their offense wasn't the thing losing them games last year. It was mostly their.
It's more, I think, scheme, line. And I think it's more scheme players, right? 49ers are, I don't think, as offensively gifted. I think they just call better plays. I think that they get the receivers open using play action better. At the end of the day, if you can't run the ball consistently with someone that isn't your quarterback, you're going to struggle. Like if the Ravens can't run the ball with their running backs and it's only Lamar, they're going to struggle.
Right.
Anyone in the league, that's how it is. You can't ask Josh Allen, like you've mentioned several times, to be Superman. He can do it maybe 3 or 4 snaps a game, but to ask him to do it over the course of an entire season, we saw what happened. He struggled with injury. He didn't look the same when it mattered most in the playoffs. And that's not fair to ask of him. It's just not. And so I think they're right there. And I think the great thing is all of this stems from just being competitive. Diggs is one of the most competitive players in the league. He wants to win. He wants to put up big numbers. He wants Josh to put up big numbers. They want to go out there and do their thing. And when he feels like maybe they're falling behind and he's seeing teams make these moves, in his mind, he thinks we're falling behind. But I think there's a bigger picture thing, that the front office might know about that maybe he doesn't know about or isn't as in the room in some of these meetings. And he just, vocally probably shouldn't be saying some of the stuff he's saying. And it's taken out of context and the media loves it. And coaches don't want, as a coach, you don't want to hear players like that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves when I'm coaching is and it doesn't happen often, but every once in a while, a player will suggest something, to me and there's times where it's an honest suggestion and it works. And it's like, yeah, here's why we should, or here's why we shouldn't do it. But there's some times where it's like, hey, maybe we should put this so-and-so in, and it's like, no. You don't do that conversation. That's for the coaches to do. Just do your thing. Just play. Be the best player you can be the best teammate you can be. And that fighting with your coach is not being a great teammate. Whether it's driven from,
and you're right. There's multiple sides
reason.
of it. And look, it's different at the NFL level, right? Because you have egos to manage, you have $1 million contracts to manage, and all of these guys are used to being the top dog everywhere they went their entire lives 90% of the time, right? Like that, you don't get to the NFL unless you're one of those guys. So I get that some players are going to be a little bit more opinionated and think that they're entitled to raise those opinions to a coach, because it's not like a student and an adult anymore. It's two freaking adults that are in different positions of power that they have to kind of negotiate through. So, but you're right. I think at the end of the day, look, people are going to dramatize this and say, and we definitely were guilty of it last week, being like, all right, like Madden curse, like, here we go.
Yeah. I'm still going to say the Madden curse. I still don't.
Just for fun.
From our unders episode, right? I do think the Bills will be worse than they were last year.
But I think that you're right in the sense that this is stemming from a competitive drive, and you can't fault any professional athlete for wanting their team to be better, right?
You've seen Tom Brady yell at he's one of the best teammates. You ask any of his teammates, he's going to say he's one of the best teammates they've ever had. Webut we've seen him yelling at coaches,
into it with
yelling at players,
smashing iPad. No iPad is safe.
Peyton Manning. You've seen cut-ups of him just going in on people, players and coaches. You saw him. I saw a clip of him yelling at Jeff Saturday, his center, for a long time in Indianapolis. And it was like personal. But again, you as a player and as a competitor, you got to put that aside and go out there and realize that if Jeff Saturday doesn't do his job, there is no Peyton Manning. Right.
And that happens at every single level too. There were definitely times where, like on the field, especially like, for those that don't know, like I had to kind of compete for PT. I was 5'10" and I was an offensive lineman. Right. But like, me and whoever was on the other side of that defense, a lot of the time would get into it and it would get heated. And sometimes we were competing for the same spot and just happened, it was like a demo situation or whatever. And like emotions run super, super high in football. That's just what happens. And then off the field, you make it up. You're fine. You're good. You're on the same page, right?
We would have fights all the time in practice, and
all the time.
Especially when you don't know the people as well. Like you get to college and it's like it's just a pool of people from all over the place. That's when it really comes out, because everyone's competing. You're competing for spots, and you don't know these guys as well, right? So if someone does cross you and you feel offended, or you feel like it was a dirty hit or whatever, that's where the competitive nature, you see it all the time.
Veer camp all the time too.
All the time.
You talk about getting a bunch of guys that you don't know together and no pads on, so you're feeling every single hit that gets delivered. It's that situation, it's like you're not supposed to be doing full contact. But on the offensive line, the difference between not full contact with pads on and not full contact without is there's no difference. So,
two side notes as we talk about that the competing, especially when teams scrimmage, like you just mentioned. And this is a Hard Knocks shout out and DeAndre Hopkins shout out when him and I forget what his first name was. I want to say it was D'Angelo Hall with the Redskins at the time. They got in that huge scuffle, right? And it was their team scrimmage. It was the Texans versus the Redskins. And he was running his mouth. Hopkins was running his mouth. And he's like, all right, let's see what you do next rep. And he breaks him off on a comeback. And D'Angelo Hall tears his Achilles or something. It's like one of the all-time best clips. If you haven't seen it, just Google DeAndre Hopkins.
I've seen it. I didn't know that he had like a season-ending injury off of that.
Oh, yeah. D'Angelo Hall was like done. Yeah, for extended period of time off that rep. And then another funny inter-squad scrimmage moment, Cam Newton. People got to pick and choose who they talk shit to and who they're going to fight with, because one of these small defensive backs ran his mouth with Cam. And this was, I think it was the Panthers, and I want to say, like, again, the Texans, like Cortland Finnegan. You remember him? He was the guy that Andre Johnson punched in the game. They were swinging at each other full go. He was talking shit. And Cam Newton, there's a picture of him just grabbing him right, like, underneath his, like, right here, just holding him and just smiling. Like, Cam Newton is literally getting charged by, like, 10 dudes unfazed. Because Cam Newton is like one of the most intimidating people if you're just like standing next to him.
Yeah, he is
that we've
huge.
seen in the NFL. He's just literally laughing at this guy, like holding him as this guy's trying to kill Cam. He's like, dude, you're not doing anything to me. Like, I'm easily just holding you down and just gonna pin you down.
Jamal Williams got into it with who'd they scrimmage? The Colts.
Jamal Williams in Hard Knocks was pissing me off because he would run his mouth just for no reason. Like, and he, again, competitor, and he's trying to get the energy up. But dude, there was times where he was just doing it for like, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
I think he's one of those players where while his love for the game is very genuine, he also is very aware of where the cameras are at. And both of those things can be true at the same time. But it's
I'll say that I will say this, and I was thinking about this, and this is a Lions thing, and then we'll go maybe some non-Lions, and then we'll get back into Lions.
Yeah, we'll segue, right?
David Montgomery. Okay. I have been thinking about this. I've been, looking at fantasy football stuff here pretty soon, which little shout out. We're going to be doing some fantasy football stuff here and some new episodes coming up.
Yeah.
But David Montgomery is going to be in the same exact situation Jamal Williams was. And I'm telling you right now, John, I think he's 2 times as good of a player.
Yeah, you want to see it? You want to see a stat? You want to see a stat real quick here?
He's a better. He catches the ball better out of the backfield. He has more burst, more big play ability. He breaks tackles better, and he can still get you those 1-2 yard runs that Jamal did. And if we use him, which I figure we will on 1st and 2nd and down and in the red zone, like we use Jamal, he's a fantasy football dream.
Do you see this? Carries on goal to go plays in 2022. 18, Najee Harris. 19, Miles Sanders, Saquon. 21, Dalvin Cook. 22, Zeke, Joe Mixon.
23 through 37.
16 additional plays. Nobody. 38, Jamal Williams. This is no hate on Jamal. Jamal did his job 100%. Jamal had more opportunities to score 1-yard touchdowns than anybody else in the league by a 16 opportunity margin. Yes, the dude scored a lot of touchdowns, this is why you get David Montgomery in there.
And that speaks to my point that David Montgomery is going to get those same opportunities, but he's a better player. He's a better player than Jamal, and he's going to get other opportunities as well. So if you're a fantasy football guru, David Montgomery will probably be available in most teams, in most leagues, 2nd and 3rd. He's a steal. I think he's going to be a top 4 running back fantasy football wise, period. Because he's going to get the catches mixed with Gibbs, right? And he's going to get a lot of 1st and 2nd down touches like Jamal did. And then he's going to get the goal line. He's going to get the red zone.
I don't want to get too hyped up on a rookie running back, but I do genuinely believe that we are going to have the best rushing duo in the entire NFL. And I don't think it's going to be particularly close, frankly.
It helps with how many different running plays we have, how well we execute them. And
offensive line matters a ton too.
With an OC that understands you can manipulate defenses by how you line up and by how you shift and by your personnel. And I do anticipate Ben Johnson using a lot of 2 running back sets where Gibbs is on the field. He might not be lined up at running back, but he sure as hell can still get the ball, hand it to him, or throw it to him. And then because when that's happening, you got teams are going to forget about David Montgomery, just like you see the 49ers do. If you're a 49ers fan or you're just a football fan in general, watching the 49ers, I think the Detroit Lions offense will look a lot like that in terms of their play calling, how they're lining up in formation, because I think they're going to use Jahmyr Gibbs like Debo and interchange him just how they did with McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and all those guys. And I think Montgomery and Gibbs are going to provide a very similar look. And Ben Johnson's a very smart guy. He's going to take from what other teams have done, and I think he's going to make it our own. And it's going to be really fun to watch, I think. I really do. And by the way, I placed today, before this episode, a bet on the Lions to win their division and the Seahawks to win their division. Those are my 2 larger scaled bets that I'm making preseason.
I can get behind both of those for sure. And now to segue into more Lions talk, the uniforms dropped. And let me see if I can pull it up on Twitter real quick so that people can see what we're talking about. But while I'm doing that, Mark, if you want to give your 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I don't blow it up too much in terms of it's not the worst thing I've ever seen in the world, but it just frustrates me because the Lions have a pretty cool color scheme, and they've missed on like the last like 3 or 4 alternate uniforms that they've launched. I don't love that gray color that they use as their like normal home uniform. I've never loved it. And then you mix that gray color with the weird bright blue. It's not our Honolulu. The logo isn't even what my problem is. I think the logo kind of sucks too, but I can get over that. It's really the choice of the color blue helmet with an all gray uniform. It's like,
so here's the
totally
problem.
outdated. This isn't the Oregon Ducks in 2013.
Right.
Like
so
that's
here's
what they
the
did
problem,
in the Rose Bowl in 2014.
I agree with you. And this, unfortunately, I am going to blame partially the NFL for this because they have a rule that you can only match your alternate helmet with your alternate uniform. And so the Saints found themselves in the same predicament where they had these blackout helmets with like the fleur-de-lis just like going down as like a stripe in the middle. In a vacuum, they look sick. They could only wear them with their alternate uniforms, and because of that, didn't really hit. This is the exact same situation. You're telling me you put that helmet on with our whiteout uniforms? That's sick, right? I'm a big fan of that.
Well,
you get this matte gray situation, which I think we need to get rid of these. I completely agree with you. I think we need to do something different with our alternate unis.
Dude, just do black.
Yeah, right.
Do black. Like
this is like jet black with blue detailing, and then you have the blue helmet. Like I think we could all probably get behind that. I think that'd be a cool look. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. There are significantly worse NFL unis that I've seen in my lifetime, but
it's just a bummer, right? Like when they keep hinting, hey, something cool's coming, something cool's coming. Here we go, and then they drop it, and it's like, really, like just a swing and a miss, just a swing and a miss on it, really.
But it's not the end of the world. I mean, they're using it for 2 games. Who cares? But I do agree that it was a little bit disappointing. The other thing I have to mention, because Mark, look, I get this is the debate, right? This is the debate that we've had for a long time, and I know you've probably seen this video 10 times, but I don't understand how you get from the beginning to the end of this video and not become a fan of Matthew Stafford.
I never have said I don't respect Matthew Stafford and his toughness and he's a competitor and he's fearless. He's one of the toughest dudes in the league. I will never question him in terms of that. He didn't win games in Detroit, and he was there for a very long time. He had talent put around him in certain years, and he was drafted number 1 overall. The expectation is you come to a franchise and you win, and he didn't. Never won a playoff game. Didn't win many big games. I think his all-time record in Detroit against teams with a 500 or better record is alarmingly low. He beat up on teams that were shitty. That's what he did. And notice in this game, in a moment like this, respect the competitive. It's one of the best videos that you'll ever watch in terms of toughness and showing people, like why guys like my dad will coach football for 40 years without question. It's because shit like this happens in it. He's playing against Cleveland Browns. Okay. Shitty team. Meaningless game. This is what he does. He steps up in moments where it's really not important for him to step up. That's what he always did. Now, I know he went to LA and got his ring, and people, that just makes that argument way tougher. But as a Lion, I could never respect him for the simple fact that he never lived up to what he was supposed to do, and that was win games.
And don't be wrong, he had Calvin Johnson as his wide receiver, sure.
He had a couple good defenses.
He had a couple
years there where
he had a couple good defenses, but there are things. First of all, he has dealt with what I would say were horrible, for the most part, front office draft picks for most of his career. I would say that despite, they didn't mess up their very, very high draft picks from basically losing every single game one season and then actually losing every single game the following season, right? There's that, right? There's that component. He didn't have a consistent offensive line. He had really, really spotty tight end situation. He had a great receiving core. He had a bad running game, right? I mean, we had one good season where we had a run game, which is when we had Reggie Bush for like 2 years, right? I mean, overall, offensively, he did not have a lot going for him other than, the greatest wide receiver, arguably of all time, to throw to. There wasn't a whole lot of supporting cast. I will agree the defenses during that time period, though, were pretty damn good. Our front seven was disgusting, and then we had like guys like Slay in the backfield as well. So I get that.
It's a lot of excuses, John. It's a lot of excuses. When you're drafted number 1 overall, listen, if Bryce Young fails,
I know a lot of guys that were also drafted number 1 overall that did not do anything significant with their career. I mean, take a look at Trey Lance.
Yeah,
right now,
and,
right?
and
Not
how do we
number
talk?
one,
And how do we
traded
talk?
up to
And
get
how
him.
do we talk about those guys? Do we talk
Yeah.
about them as one of the best quarterbacks of all time, or do we talk about them for being shitty? Are we going to make excuses for Zach Wilson? The Jet situation wasn't great. They didn't handle him really well.
Yeah, I mean, last year he didn't have nearly as many of excuses to make. I'll make that argument. So I just think additionally, Zach Wilson didn't get any of the opportunities he had to get his team to the playoffs, right? I mean, at least Stafford made a few playoff appearances during his time. And the times that they lost, I mean, they lost the teams that I would say were objectively better than them, and we got screwed by the refs most of the time as well.
These are all excuses, John. You know, if you listen back to this, you're just going to hear a list of excuses. He had a long time in Detroit to win. He had a long time. Most guys don't get that much time. Zach Wilson got a year and a half, right? Like he didn't, his window closed. That's usually what happens if you're a quarterback and you don't win and you're drafted high. They replace you, they cut you, whatever happens, they trade you. We give Stafford a long time, and he put up some great numbers some seasons, and he had some moments like that, like in that video you just showed against the Browns, where this is our guy, it's awesome, but he never won, and that's why I can never, in my opinion, cannot change. And he never won in Detroit, and we've won more without him than we ever did with him, and that is insane.
That's not technically true yet, but it probably will be next year. I don't want to get too hyped, but probably will be next year.
So we beat teams over 500.
That we've beat more teams over 500 at a higher clip for sure. And look, I don't disagree with all the arguments you're making. I mean, trust me, I watched as a Lions fan us get put through that hell for the decade that, you know, the Lions actually kind of were a somewhat relevant team that was always on that playoff bubble, and Stafford wasn't able to get us there. But I also think that you have that man in the crosshairs while there was a whole lot of other things that were going wrong about the Lions organization. And as we know, there's no team sport that is more of a team sport than football.
Who gets the glory, though, John, when you win? Quarterbacks. Who gets the money? Who gets the girl? Who gets the car? Who gets the house? Quarterbacks. If you lose, you get the blame.
All right.
Sorry. That's just how it is. That's how the league is. That's how the sport is. You know it. That's how it is. Look how we talk about Patrick Mahomes. He couldn't win without Kelsey, without Andy Reid, and without, you know, some of the defensive plays that those teams have made over the years. There's been a lot of times where Mahomes was bailed out by somebody else on that Chiefs team, whether it was a play call, whether it was a defensive stand. He hasn't done it all by himself, but he gets all the talk. I mean, people are honestly talking about him being the best player of all time. It's real conversations that are happening, and he's 6 years in?
Yeah.
It's insane. But
right. I mean, he keeps running at that clip. I think it's going to be the LeBron Jordan debate all over again, but it's going to be Brady Mahomes.
I hope to God not. I hope I hope somebody steps up. Here's the thing, and I want to say this. I think this might be Joe Burrow's year. I think this might be the year where Joe Shiesty, and like enter the conversation of like the Peyton Manning Brady thing that we had for the 20 years. I think we're seeing that maybe happening. And then Josh Allen's kind of like Phillip Rivers, like puts up ridiculous numbers. Everybody loves him, has like 17 kids, It is
nuts that entire era is gone, by the way, because I watched like a little highlight video that was showing, Rivers, Manning, Brady,
Breeze.
Big Ben, Breeze, all of them. And it's like, holy crap, like we're in a new era. Rodgers is the only one that's left, and he's going to be here till, another couple of years tops, probably. Maybe play 2 years for the Jets and then play a comeback year for the Vikings or something. I don't know.
John, there's two more things I want to talk about in this episode. Yep. Okay. One will be our favorite team in the divisions. Okay. Yep. For no reason. Like just teams that we randomly kind of root for.
So that's what I was, and like I did want to segue because even though Mark's segueing it incredibly well, the reason why I wanted to make this a conversation topic is because of the fact that if you're a diehard football fan, you got to make it somewhat entertaining for yourself, no matter who you're watching. And the best way to do that is to have a favorite team in every division.
It's the dirty little secret, dude. You know the song "My Dirty Little Secret." Every football fan, if you truly watch football because you love football, like there's people out there that only watch the Lions because they like the Lions, and that's great.
Fine.
And that's great. But if you're a true football fan, like John and I,
we're fans of 8 teams.
You watch football. You watch football 4 days a week. You have a couple college teams you keep your eye on every year, even if you have no reason to root for them, even if you're not from that state or didn't go to that school or whatever. And you have a few NFL teams that it might be a couple players you like. It might be their uniforms. It might be their location. It might be their coach. But there's a couple teams you secretly root for if your team ain't it. And John and I have had a lot of years where our team ain't it.
And honestly, even if our team is it,
the Lions only play one game a week. Like there's a lot of other football and I want to usually root for somebody when I'm watching it
exactly.
I mean, it just kind of you naturally gravitate towards some teams. And so, John, if you want to just pull up just the NFL teams and by division and just so it's nice and easy to see who we are picking out of every division.
Yeah, Mark, you might not be a real football fan though, because I have this completely committed to memory.
I do as well, but it's it's easier to look at it.
I know. I'm giving you a hard time. I'm giving you a hard time.
And then the other thing I want to talk about, which I think it's non-football related, is the submarine, the Titanic thing that's lost.
I've had enough about the submarine, but I'll entertain it.
It's horrifying.
It's crazy, but okay. Well, do you want to tackle that first and then get into here? I can stop screen sharing for a second.
Yeah, let's
get into the stupid submarine
honestly,
first,
so that I can talk about this whole episode. It's been in the back of my mind.
Look, it is horrible. It sucks. I feel so bad for those people, and I feel bad about the media phenomenon that it's become because they are literally suffocating to death at the bottom. They are suffocating to death at the bottom of the ocean, and people are making memes about it. Now, the one kind of funny comment that I have to make, the person I feel the worst for out of that entire situation is the tour guide. Why? All of them are suffocating to death. One of them has to suffocate to death and get a negative Yelp review, the worst Yelp review you've ever heard in your entire life by 4 billionaires while you're also suffocating to death. There's only one guy in that submarine where that's the situation with, where he literally is sitting there like, I can't believe you effed this up. I can't believe we're all going to die because of you. And he's hearing that is how he's going out, is 3 days of just hearing all 4 of these super rich dudes in his ear about how he got them all killed. And
that's got to be like one of the worst
possible ways you could die, right? Like, that's messed up. So that's all I have to say. That's my
the irony too that they were looking at the Titanic is you can't write. I mean, you literally can't write
about 4 more people or 5 more people.
You can't write a better script to a horror movie or a documentary or whatever than what just happened. It's insane.
And look, I got to say this. I don't know if you have the same reaction. I go on defense mode when something is getting talked about too often on Twitter, because most of the takes
all over my TikTok.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's and most of the takes are bad or annoying. And to me, I just eventually get to a point where I don't even want to talk about it or hear nothing about it. So I did give you, what's the word? I definitely gave you your time of day with it. There's my 2 cents. Go ahead and say anything else you might want to say about it, and then we're going to get back to football.
I mean, no, that's pretty much it. I just keep thinking about it, how horrifying. I think that would be the last thing I would ever do is go down willingly in a submarine to the bottom of the ocean.
That's terrifying.
In what world?
No.
I don't think if you paid me $250,000 to do it, I think I'd say no. I don't think I would do it.
Yeah.
But yet they're paying $250 to go down there.
Yeah, and apparently one of the dudes on there's done it multiple times. So I just look, everybody has things that they like to do. Risking my life at the bottom of the ocean. Hannah and I were talking about this. The ocean's scarier than space to me. I love space.
The scariest thing. The
ocean is terrifying.
We know nothing. We know more about space than we know about the ocean.
Yes.
We know nothing about it. We know 3% of the ocean's been explored. We have no idea what the hell is down there, what can happen. It's so big. It's don't even get me started on that. That's a whole different. We'll talk about that maybe in a different random episode. But I had to bring that up because
the ocean is scary episode.
And I watched Reservoir Dogs. Very good movie.
Isn't it a damn good movie?
Very
So
good
what
movie.
Tarantino movies have you not seen yet then? Or which
think
ones have you seen?
I've seen Reservoir Dogs, Pulp
Okay.
Fiction,
Okay.
Inglourious Bastards, Django,
Okay.
the new one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Kill Bills?
Seen Kill Bills, loved Kill Bills.
Oh, those are great movies.
I think
Okay,
I've
yeah.
seen it. Am I missing anything?
Hateful Eight,
I've seen Hateful Eight.
and then
Reservoir Dogs is the last one I just watched.
Jackie Brown, which isn't worth watching.
Haven't
in my
seen
opinion.
that,
That's his
no.
worst movie. So, got it. That's all of them. I'm a huge Tarantino stan, so
One of these episodes will rank those movies.
Oh, hey, we got 1 week of absolute off-season nothingness, so that might be next episode. We'll see. We might have a pretty awesome guest. But by the way, like truly getting to interview your dad and being at the front seat of that entire interview and like at the helm, because obviously it's kind of weird if you're asking your dad questions about that stuff.
I talk to him every day.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That was I know that we've had some pretty, high caliber guests on, but that was one of my favorite interviews we've ever done just because I know your dad so well too. And so I get to, as an adult and no longer like a player that he's coaching, get to ask him a bunch of cool football questions.
Yeah. And for those listening, he's one of the most humble people in the world. So he's not gonna like that dude, all he does is develop young men into being just great
high school
people.
Coaching Hall of Fame. Truly was like a father figure to me.
State champion coach.
State champion.
I mean, he's his
multiple
career
state champion appearances.
Yeah, his record is like, I mean, he's won like 80% of his games. And keep in mind, at Rochester Adams, as he hinted, he does not recruit. We can't even get guys from out of this from out of our territory. Like they can't come, even if they want to come here, they can't come here. Like it's not a school of choice. So we get what we get, and we have to make the most of it. And he has done an amazing job for over 20 years doing that. And I mean, just it doesn't matter if you have like me and John's team, which had some talent, or like, the last couple of years that, that where I've been there coaching, we've had some incredible talent on the team. It doesn't matter. I mean, he just wins games and he gets the most
I've shed light on that too, where, like our class, we were able to make it to the playoffs somehow. And like, we were not very athletically gifted, to be put bluntly. Again,
I was young guys.
Yeah, I was that next guy in most of the time on the offensive line, and I'm 5'10", was like 190 pounds when I played, and like going up against dudes that are easily twice my size, and that is the type of kids that he's been dealing with his entire 20-year career, and he turns them into winning, not only winning organizations, which is special, but he also turns them into young men that can take a lot of really powerful lessons from football that apply to the rest of their lives. And I think that's obviously the more important feature as well.
Yeah. So. And he wins the right way. You know what I mean? I think that's the message that gets sent to these kids. And it's a message for life. Like do things the right way. Otherwise, if you have all the success and you're doing it in a dirty way or you're cheating to get there, it's not honorable. And it doesn't feel good when you've reached your point of, destination. But when you reach it and you did everything that you could the right way, there's no better feeling.
Right.
So, and he sends that message to these kids. So, yeah. He was
very
awesome dad, awesome guest, awesome coach.
100%. All right. So, AFC East. I would say that and I think we probably have the same one. Like the team. This is
for this season, right, John?
Yeah. Okay.
Upcoming.
If it's for this season, I would say that the team that I'm pulling for the most in the AFC East are the New York Jets, because I really want to see a Jets-Lions Super Bowl, and the only way that happens is if the Jets are kicking ass.
I don't know. I find myself rooting for Aaron Rodgers, and I really don't know why. I almost like a lot of people
like A-Rod.
I've always liked him, and I don't know why, because he kind of stands for a lot of things that like I am against. Like he's a little bit selfish. He's got an ego. He's cocky, but in a weird way that makes me want to see him win. Because when I'm watching the end of a game and he has the ball and it's a 2-minute drill, I just feel like I could just throw $100 on it and not have to worry. Like he's going to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is that like he's kind of a hippie, and I just like his attitude of him being like this incredibly gifted athlete and just like being pretty nonchalant about everything. I just think like, it's the same reason why I like Joe Burrow is like there's a cool factor to him. There's a casual factor, and to be that cool and casual about being as gifted of an athlete as you are, like just makes it that much awesome.
And let's be honest,
more awesome.
He's the best quarterback talent we've had in the NFL in the last 40 years.
Yeah, and
Like,
obviously Brady
He's more
has the
talented,
rings.
I think, overall than Mahomes at this point. I think Mahomes
Yeah,
might pass him, but I would
no,
still
at
say
this
Aaron
point,
Rodgers
yeah.
in terms of if you look at their entire. Obviously, has done way more, but some of the throws that dude's made, some of the plays he made when he was younger, ridiculous stuff we've never seen before. And it
You
kind of
look at his
sets the
throwing
tone for
motion, same
Mahomes.
thing with the casual
It's so
factor of it.
smooth.
He's just like,
He
and
flicks
it's
his
like,
wrist. It's insane.
it's
No
so
one throws like that. No one. He's the only
makes
one
it
I've
look
seen
so
do that. It
easy.
makes it so easy.
Yeah, so it sounds like Jets for both of us. Then you're off of the Bills hype train, or what?
I think this year, yeah, I think I'd like to see the Jets win more. And shout out to Conklin too, who we've had on the
Yeah,
show. He's
yep, friend of the show. AFC North. And I think this is not a surprise to the people who've been hearing me talk about this team. I'm pulling for the Ravens. Two reasons. One, I want Lamar to shut everybody the hell up, and I want to see the Ravens win a playoff game. And two, my best friend that I made, one of my best friends that I've made while I've been here in DC was a huge Ravens fan. And I went to a Ravens game. Their color scheme's sick, their stadium's sick, their fan base is sick. I like the way they play football. I like John Harbaugh. Like that's the number of reasons why I'd like to see the Ravens come out of this division.
for me, it's Cincinnati. It's Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, Joe Cool, whatever you want to call him. Hard not to root for him. Hard not to like him. Number one draft pick comes into a team that just wasn't good and has flipped that franchise around as one is supposed to, and they're drafted number one overall, unlike someone named Stafford did in Detroit. Joe Burrow has done everything he's supposed to do in Cincinnati, and he's hard not to like, man. And I love that he's an underdog too. Like he just
have to keep getting the Stafford digs in there.
I have to get that dig in him. He's too perfectly set up.
AFC South, I think we're gonna have the same team here. Jags are just a cool story right now. And look, I get that they're the favorite to win the division, so it kind of seems like a cop out. But I think everybody wants to see Trevor Lawrence succeed in similar ways that you're talking about Joe Burrow. They've loaded up this offseason. Peterson's pretty easy to root for as a coach, and they've been bad for a long time. And it's cool to watch them, maybe actually be sustainably good back-to-back seasons. So I'm going Jags.
I think the Jags will be good, and I will bet money on the Jags and all that. But in terms of like if I'm just casually watching football, I think that I'd love to see the Texans. Not because I'm a huge fan of Stroud or anything like that, but I liked what they did in the draft, getting him and Will Anderson. Troy Harrison, former teammate of mine, former guest on the show, is still there. I like Pierce at running back. The Texans have been bad for a while.
They just played a cool highlight with them. Harrison the other day too
on their
sick.
Instagram.
Yep.
They've been bad for so long, and I think it would be cool to see the Texans in a division that's kind of wide open. The Jags obviously are pretty favored, but besides that, like who else is going to compete with them? I would love to see the Texans step up
for sure. AFC West, this is the one conference where it bounces around a lot for me. For a long time, it was the Raiders. I hate how that team is managed so much that I think I've kind of been a little bit more with the Chargers. Now Sean Payton's back into the mix, but I don't really like Russell Wilson. So really, like all four of these teams, I'm kind of indifferent on. I would say, even though my expectations, frankly, are pretty low for the Chargers this year because they've been so hyped up and have just failed to meet expectations every year, I think I'm going to say that, the team I kind of pull for in the AFC West is the Chargers.
It's the Chargers, without doubt. I've always had we talk about like, obviously this is for the next season, but I've had a weird Chargers thing since like LaDainian Tomlinson was still there. With like, I always liked Phillip Rivers. I always liked that they were trying to go up against the Giants, like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. And it just seems like they were always that just a little bit of a tier below and could never really get it done. But I had his jersey when I was growing up.
They're like your Saints for me.
Exactly. I love the blue. I love the blue, right? The baby blue that they had, the sweet baby blue uniforms were so sweet. The Bolt logo is sweet. I don't know what it was for the Chargers. I just always gravitated towards them as like my side team. And I like Justin Herbert. I like Keenan Allen, and I like Austin Eckler. I like Derwin James. I like everything they got going. So I hope that they do something this year. And they're fun to watch.
They're super fun to watch because their offense is, high powered if everybody's healthy. NFC East. I would say overall, probably the Eagles has been the team in the East that I've kind of pulled for. I bet on them to win the Super Bowl back in 2017. They won me $1,000 that night. So thanks, because I was a poor college kid at the time. That went a long way. I hate the Cowboys. The Giants I'm iffy on, and I hate the Commanders. So it makes it easy to root for the Eagles because most times I want them to beat their divisional competition because I truly dislike 2 out of those 3 teams.
I don't root for any of the teams in this division. I really don't. I don't really like the Eagles. Don't like the Cowboys. I guess maybe you could say the Giants. But I never liked Eli Manning. So that was a huge thing for me. I didn't like Eli Manning. Obviously now we got like Khalil's on the Giants, Troy Brown's on the Giants, like guys that I am close with and that I love as friends and teammates. So I'd have to say the Giants, but I really don't like root for these teams ever. If I don't know somebody on the team, I've never in my life rooted for these teams.
Yeah, and this division, it's weird. It's always weird. It's always kind of this weird, bloodbath. There's been other times where every single one of these teams in these divisions have been horrible. So, I don't know. I definitely don't pull too hard for the Eagles, but I do find them being the team that I mean, NFC North, obviously Lions. We'll change this question up. Who out of these rivals, right? I feel like every division, they have a team that they respect, a team that they hate, and a team that's like little brother, right? To me, for this division, you might agree. I've always respected the Packers, even though I freaking hate them. I've always seen Bears as like the irrelevant little brother, and I just hate the Vikings. Every time they beat us, it pisses me off.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. But I have like a weird, sweet, like I'm cheating on my wife type feeling with the Vikings. Like there's been something about
come on, man.
I don't know, dude. The skull is sweet.
The skull's cool.
The skull's sweet, and then I don't know what it is about the Vikings, man. That if they're not playing the Lions, I secretly kind of root for them. Like I like them. I always did. I liked Adam Thielen. I liked Diggs when he was there. I liked Keenum when he was there.
They're a fraudulent ass team, bro. I can't.
I didn't say they were good. I mean, they've been good for a few
seasons.
Look
at this. 13-4, point differential -3. How often do you see that?
I know. It's that last year was absolutely insane. And I'm not saying that they're always good. I just have a weird thing that like Adrian Peterson was awesome. Like I don't know what it is with the Vikings, but I have like a weird affair going on with them if they don't play the Lions. And their uniforms are sweet. Sorry.
Their uniforms are cool. Their color scheme's cool. I'll give them that. Except I'm sorry, I have to admit it. Their helmets, it does not look like a Viking horn, and we don't have to say what it looks like, but I cannot get that picture out of my head with their helmets, and I just think it's a bad look.
I got no problem with it. Let it ride.
All right, whatever, man.
Hey, it's better than the Lions freaking 2-stripe with a weird long lion logo they just launched today.
That shit's cool. The helmet is cool. The uniforms they're paired with is not. I'm gonna.
The helmet could be way better.
NFC South, you know who my team is. Who dat? Saints, I've been a big fan of theirs because of Sean Payton and Drew Brees and kind of the synergy and the combo that they had since like 2011 or 12 or so. And I've followed them as my second team, kind of like what Mark is saying, ever since, right? I've pretty much watched them just about as much as I've watched the Lions since I was in like middle school or so.
I would say the Saints as well, even though I'm not super into any of these teams in this division, but I would say the Saints just because I respected Drew Brees, I respected Sean Payton, and it was hard not to root for a team like that. I mean, just a lot of good dudes on that team, and they just did things the right way for such a long time. So I respected them, and they were very good for a long time too.
West, for me, it's the Niners, and I think it's the same for you. I just love the way they play football. I think they're like just the most like hard-nosed yet smart, resourceful football team. Very stable shit from a coaching standpoint. Love a lot of their players. I mean, Debo's freaking awesome. Warner's freaking awesome. Like they just have a lot to like. And so for me, it's the Niners. Color scheme's cool too, right? That bronze with the red. I don't usually like red. You get bronze and black in there. All right, you're making a pretty good argument for red.
I actually, for me, it's actually the Cardinals, and it's not because of what's happened in recent years. I used to love Larry Fitzgerald. I loved
You
when
did
Kurt
love
War-
Larry
I
Fitz.
loved Kurt Warner when he was there. They had some really good teams, and I just I liked watching them, and for some reason the Niners I respect, and I like watching them schematically.
Fun fact. I gotta say this. It was, I think, 8th, maybe 9th grade. We had a fantasy draft at my house because they're fun to do in person when you can, right? And so we had one at my house, and I had like an iPad that I screen shared to our living room TV, and we had all the boys over to do a draft. And Mark comes in he's the only one that's like clearly like spent hours preparing for this draft. He has a booklet filled with notes, filled with all sorts of stuff, like, the strategy, top players, sleepers, whatever. And if I remember correctly, the very first person you drafted was Larry Fitzgerald, which was completely not by any of those 3,000 books that you walked in.
It was not
with.
the first pick, but it
I'm
was
pretty
way
sure
higher
it was
than
the
he was
first pick.
projected.
Way higher.
I took running backs, and then he wasn't even. You know how you have the best available board. He wasn't on the screen.
I had to
he wasn't on the
go
screen. We actually had to find him to draft him. So that's what was so funny about it. But yeah, it was probably in the 5th or 6th round, and he was at the time, and he was totally on a downfall.
I think it was higher than that. That was, and don't get me wrong,
he ended up getting me some points that year, by the way.
I was about to say he ended up actually having a decent season. Mark just took him way too high.
I need to have him.
Gotta have him.
For morale. Team morale. He's a good team captain, team leader.
Look, that's all we got for this episode. Again, I tend to commend Mark and I, not to pat ourselves on the back too hard, but for putting together, an hour and a half of football related content in the middle of June. We are making sure that despite the slow news weeks, we are keeping this podcast entertaining and engaging and having a decent amount of shit to talk about and argue about. And look, we might have an awesome guest next week. We'll kind of see. We're trying to get that booked. Fantasy football. And then look, man, right there, we're getting into camp and preseason. We're freaking ready to go.
Division breakdowns coming.
Got to do that for sure.
Yeah, fantasy football, division breakdowns, and guests are coming. And then we're gonna, by the time we do all those, we're gonna hit the season.
Yep, exactly. So we appreciate everybody watching along, and we will see you guys next week.
See you guys.
As I find our title screen. Peace.